Hello, my name is Ian Kluge, and welcome to the Baha'i Philosophy channel. Today's presentation is the first part of our examination of the role of reason in the Baha'i writings. Please note that this presentation is a revised version of the previous introductory talk. I would also like to thank you for the time and attention you are investing in this talk and hope that you will find it worthwhile. The core mission of this channel is to encourage people to explore the Baha'i writings from a philosophical perspective, whether it is a perspective adopted in these talks or from some other perspective. Of course, it must be understood from the start that the Baha'i faith is first, foremost, and essentially a divine revelation, but a revelation that embeds a logical, coherent, and hierarchically integrated philosophical worldview. In other words, the philosophical aspects embedded in the Baha'i writings are an integral part of the revelation itself and contribute directly to our understanding of the Baha'i teachings. My specific purpose is to study the philosophy using concepts, terms, and arguments explicitly provided by the Baha'i writings themselves. These concepts, terms, and arguments are originally part of the Baha'i writings and are not a result of translating from one language into another or by imposing an external philosophical paradigm on the Baha'i writings. Because they are given to us by Baha'u'llah, Abdul Baha, and Shoghi Effendi, they are the logical place to begin our study of the philosophical aspects of the writings. Of course, other approaches to the Baha'i writings are possible, such as process philosophy, feminist philosophy, and comparative philosophy in regards to various philosophers and worldviews. I would like to remind viewers that in the Baha'i faith, there is no privileged class of clergy or scholars whose views are immune to challenge and disagreement. In other words, understanding of the texts is personal. Indeed, the Baha'i writings strongly emphasize the duty of all individuals to investigate the truth for themselves. Because of God's infinite generosity in giving us an endlessly evolving reality, no human being has ever or will ever be able to write the final and definitive study on anything. These talks are selections of my work in progress, the Baha'i Writings of Philosophical Approach, which I estimate will be finished in late 2023 or early 24. However, before I continue, I would like to state that with his generous permission, I gratefully dedicate this channel to Dr. Iraj Ayman. Over many decades and in all parts of the world, Dr. Ayman's tireless work for the Irfan Foundation and the Irfan Colloquia has encouraged and brought attention to the work of countless Baha'i scholars. He has truly exemplified the Baha'i principle of investigating the truth for oneself. Without Dr. Ayman's efforts, Baha'i scholarship would be much poorer. His work has enriched us all. I would also like to express grateful thanks to my wife, Kirsty, for her unfailing encouragement and support for my research and writing over the years. She was and is the necessary precondition of all my work. Without her, none of my work would have been possible. So let us begin. Reason and logic play an essential role in the Baha'i philosophical worldview. The following statement encapsulates the Baha'i outlook on rationality, and this comes from the Promulgation of Universal Peace, page 23. If religious belief and doctrine is at variance with reason, it proceeds from the limited mind of man and not from God. Therefore, it is unworthy of belief and not deserving of attention. The heart finds no rest in it, and real faith is impossible. How can man believe that which he knows to be opposed to reason? Is this possible? Can the heart accept that which reason denies? Reason is the first faculty of man, and the religion of God is in harmony with it. Let us look at some of the ideas explicitly and implicitly contained in this declaration. Number one, it establishes a clear and direct connection between the intellect and the heart by asking, can the heart accept that which reason denies? In other words, heartfelt commitment and rationality are not opposed to each other, but are closely correlated. Neither one by itself is sufficient to establish genuine faith. Without reason, real faith is impossible, as Abdu'l-Baha says. Number two, it establishes a clear and direct connection between the Baha'i revelation and reason or rationality. This can be seen in the words, if religious belief and doctrine is at variance with reason, it proceeds from the limited mind of man and not from God. Therefore, it is unworthy of belief. Number three, reason or rationality is the first faculty of human nature. Elsewhere, Abdu'l-Baha says that the rational soul is what distinguishes humans from animals, and that's in Some Answered Questions, page 55, section 55. And reason is the human reality or essence, in Some Answered Questions, section 38. This suggests that the heart cannot genuinely accept irrational ideas or beliefs, and for that reason is rational. However, as our explorations on Baha'i epistemology will show, unlike the human mind, the heart does not reason by means of abstract concept, syllogism, or formal truth tables. Nevertheless, the heart is not intrinsically irrational. Baha'u'llah is not inviting us to be irrational when he often repeats such instructions as, ponder this in my heart, in thy heart, that thou mayest comprehend its meaning. That's Gleanings, page 46. And ponder in thine heart, did ye, notwithstanding your behavior and the things your hands have wrought, succeed in quenching the fire of God? And that is from the Summons of the Lord of Hosts, page 224. And finally he asks, should thou ponder these words in thy heart, thou wilt of a certainty find the doors of divine wisdom and infinite knowledge flung open before thy face. That's from the Kitab-i-Khan, page 102. In this way, in its own way, the human heart is able to comprehend, evaluate, and draw conclusions, and therefore cannot, in good faith, accept what it knows to be irrational. In other words, the heart also has ruminative, cognitive, reflective capacity, by means of which we're able to explore, evaluate, or feel our way through or respond to situations, beliefs, and arguments. This does not mean humans always use this capacity, but the power to do so is available, and the Baha'i writings require us to use it. Another point. Any conflict between reason or mind and the heart is bound to have negative consequences for individuals and societies, since it is a violation of human nature as established by God. When this happens, humans no longer function as unified beings, and thereby are needlessly weakened by inner conflicts. These inner conflicts manifest in behavior which hobbles or frustrates intellectual, spiritual, social, and material progress. Human evolution is held back. It is worth noting that contemporary empirical evidence for this is found in such scientific texts as Antonio Damasio's Descartes' Error, which provides scientific support for Baha'u'llah's psychological understanding of the close relationship between reason and the heart. In addition, internal dissonance between reason and the heart undermines Abdu'l-Baha's definition of faith. He defines faith as first, conscious knowledge, and second, the practice of good deeds. And this is in Tablets of Abdu'l-Baha, Volume 3, page 549. A conflict between reason and the heart weakens our confidence that we really do know something. In other words, we are not sure whether the data we have is knowledge or not. This in turn makes it difficult to be motivated to act, leading thereby to half-hearted action, which is often no better than no action at all. In other words, if reason and the heart are working against one another, it would take highly unusual circumstances to motivate the actions that distinguish genuine faith from mere talk. This distinction between actual faith and even well-intentioned talk is noted by Abdu'l-Baha, who states that there is indeed an abundance of lofty ideals and sentiments that cannot be put into effect. Therefore, we must confine ourselves to that which is practical. And that is from Some Answered Questions, section 77. In other words, conscious knowledge, and by extension commitment, are necessary but not sufficient to constitute rational faith, which can only be attained when knowledge is completed by action. This understanding of faith is in sharp contrast to the biblical definition of faith, which states that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And that's in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. However, it is important to understand that in the Baha'i view, the biblical definition of faith is not wrong in itself, but is simply no longer appropriate, that is, not usefully applicable to the challenges facing humanity during this stage of history. The fourth major point we can draw from Abdu'l-Baha's declaration of the correlation of reason and the heart is the following. His declaration suggests that God's creation, which includes revelation, is orderly and rational, from which it logically follows that there is a correlation or correspondence between correct reasoning and knowledge about reality. Several consequences follow from this. A. This is a realist theory of reason, which rules out any form of dogmatic skepticism, that is, the view that in principle no one can know the truth and or the denial that there is any foundational truth to know. This is why Abdu'l-Baha says that philosophy consists in comprehending, so far as human power permits, the realities of things as they are in themselves. And that's from Some Answered Questions, section 59. We shall examine this correspondence theory of knowledge more carefully in our talks about epistemology. B. This encapsulating statement about the correlation of heart and mind also implies that neither individuals nor cultures have understandings of reality that are entirely subjective. Objective, that is, God created facts about nature or human nature or reality in general, must be taken into account. Knowledge is not a simple matter of personal or cultural preferences. Creation as we know it is structured to be accessible to correctly used reason, which can give us true knowledge about the real world. Indeed, if it didn't, humans could not have survived 3 million years of evolution. Nor could there be any science which also uses reason to explore reality. D. Another consequence of Abdu'l-Baha's correlation of heart and mind is that error is always possible in human reasoning, and that even the most sincerely held personal or cultural beliefs are not necessarily true. Indeed, the Baha'i writings frequently point out the existence of errors that should be overcome. For example, the belief that there has only been one manifestation of God in human history, instead of a line of successive manifestations, is a fundamental error that must be corrected if humanity is to progress. E. Although, from a Baha'i perspective, Baha'u'llah's revelation is authoritative for the modern world, this does not, and on the basis of his own teachings should not, hinder us from the independent investigation of truth, because, as he says, once every soul inquireth into truth, society will be freed from the darkness of continually repeating the past. This is from Abdu'l-Baha's Selections, page 248. To advance the philosophical and practical goals of Baha'u'llah's revelation, Abdu'l-Baha provides rational arguments, which are what the people of the world require in this day. That's from Some Answered Questions, section 3. Such a rational approach is reinforced by existence of the Feast of Questions. In general, reason serves four functions in the Baha'i writings. First, it serves to analyze what the Baha'i writings say in order to understand the teachings and the underlying reasons for them. The leading question here is, why would Baha'u'llah, Abdul-Baha, and Shoghi Effendi say a certain thing? Such careful analysis may strengthen our confidence in the Baha'i writings and thereby inspires rational trust, and with it the heart. This unified action of heart and mind amplifies the power of our understanding. Rational trust is based on carefully examined evidence from the past to the likelihood of good results in the future. For example, we swallow the prescribed pills given to us by our pharmacist because she has always prepared them correctly in the past. We know there is a slight chance of a mistake or, horribly, of malfeasance, but the overwhelming odds are that the medicine is what she says it is. The rational arguments given for the Baha'i writing serve to build such rational trust as well. I shall discuss this issue again when we consider the nature of faith. The second function of reason is to act as a bulldozer, that is, to clear away the puzzles, disagreements, and misunderstandings that prevent a wholehearted and rational acceptance of the Baha'i faith. It helps clear the way for a direct and clear understanding of the writings. I shall explore this further in the section on epistemology. The third function of reason is to help us apply the teachings in a rational manner that will actually get the intended results. Reason helps to ensure that our actions are in keeping with our goals and the nature of things, situations, and people are working with Baha'u'llah's revelation, which must not be allowed to become a pipe dream of lofty ideals, sentiments that cannot be put into effect. That was from Some Answered Question 77. The fourth function of reason is to help us correct or update or rethink past beliefs that no longer serve the best interests of humanity today. The Baha'i writings do this in several ways. For example, they explain past beliefs in light of the new philosophical paradigm they provide. Such is the case with the Christian doctrine of the Holy Trinity, or the Buddhist concept of emptiness, or the Muslim doctrine that the Prophet Muhammad is the final seal of the prophets. One of the distinguishing features of the Baha'i writings is that they explicitly invite philosophical, that is, a rational approach to understanding Baha'u'llah's revelation. Indeed, Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, and his two authorized interpreters, Abdul-Baha and Shoghi Effendi, continually use certain concepts, terms, and arguments from the philosophy of Aristotle, Plato, and Plotinus in explicating and applying the teachings. The Baha'i writings confirm the validity of such Aristotelian concepts as substance, potential, form, matter, accident, essence, and fourfold causality. In addition, the Baha'i writings also confirm Plato's teaching that the material world is a shadow, or reflection, or a projection into the lower plane of being from a superior non-material world. Indeed, God's relationship to the created world is by means of an intermediary, that is, the manifestation of God in Baha'i terminology, and the demiurge in Plato's work. The Baha'i writings also confirm Plotinus' concept of creation by emanation. All of these concepts will be explained in the next few talks. I refer to these three philosophers sometimes as the Greek tradition. It is important to emphasize that the Baha'i writings only use certain concepts of the Greek tradition. They do not accept everything Aristotle, Plato, and Plotinus have written. For example, they completely reject Aristotle's view of the female sex, the organization of Plato's Republic, and Plotinus' concept of ontological oneness with God in moments of mystical ecstasy. Here are examples of passages from the Baha'i writings that clearly invite philosophical investigation. The first, some hold that the body is the substance and that it subsists by itself, and that the spirit is an accident which subsists through the substance of the body. The truth, however, is that the rational soul is the substance through which the body subsists. If the accident, the body, is destroyed, the substance, the spirit, remains. And that is from Some Answered Questions, section 60. Another quotation from Baha'u'llah's Gleanings, page 66. Unto this subtle, this mysterious and ethereal being, that is, the manifestations, God hath assigned a twofold nature, the physical, pertaining to the world of matter, and the spiritual, which is born of the substance of God himself. It is very obvious in this case that the substance of God cannot refer to anything material and must refer to something else. A third example. The substance of something is usually contrasted with its accidents. A substance denotes the essential being of an entity. As Aristotle explains, substances are subjects for all other things, that is, accidents, and all other things are predicated of them or in them. An example of a substance is this man or this horse, whereas the predicated accidents, according to Aristotle, consists of quantity, quality, relation, place, time, posture, possession, action, and passivity. So if we say Socrates is existing, existence in this case is a predicated quality of the substance Socrates. The term substance is roughly equivalent to essence and reality, which refer to that by which a thing is what it is, though differences between whether the subject is universal or an individual may apply. And this comes from Abdu'l-Baha's Tablet on the Unity of Existence, page 25. Skip. Over the course of my talks, we shall unpack what these powerful metaphysical and ontological statements mean. What is evident here is the Aristotelian concepts and terms, which we have already mentioned: substance, form, accident, essence, potential, as well as some of Aristotle's categories. This aspect of the Baha'i writings is explored in detail in my paper, The Aristotelian Substratum of the Baha'i Writings, and Neoplatonism and the Baha'i Writings, Parts 1 and 2, both of which are published in the Baha'i journal called Lights of Irfan. A number of clarifications are necessary at this point about the Greek and especially Aristotelian concepts used in the writings. As we shall see later in these talks, Baha'u'llah is a manifestation of God and has intrinsic knowledge of creation, and therefore did not need to borrow any concepts from the Greek philosophers, nor was he influenced by them. Being a manifestation of God, his knowledge is innate and spontaneous and not acquired knowledge, and that's from Baha'i Scriptures, page 300, and the Promulgation of Universal Peace, page 467. In the same we as humans have the same kind of innate knowledge of our own sensations, thoughts, and feelings. We do not need to go to school to know we feel happy, sad, or frightened. This knowledge is immediate and direct and requires no intermediary. The fact of Baha'u'llah's innate knowledge leads to an important consequence, namely, that he freely chose to use these Greek concepts to explain his teachings. Clearly, he could have used concepts from different philosophical traditions or revealed an entirely new set of concepts, terms, and arguments. But he chose not to do so, as is explicitly evident in the Baha'i writings, and in my opinion, this confirms their privileged place and validity for understanding his revelation and reality in general. They have, so to speak, Baha'u'llah's imprimatur, which is why Abdu'l-Baha continued and expanded their use in his talks and tablets. It is obvious that since his revelation was meant for our time and circumstances, that the concepts and terms that it employs are adequate to understand the reality in which we live. Of course, all previous manifestation had the same innate knowledge as Baha'u'llah, but did not reveal it to humanity because humanity was not sufficiently involved to understand it. The fundamental Baha'i doctrine of progressive revelation teaches that revelations are limited by mankind's capacity at certain times and has nothing to do with inequality among the manifestations themselves. Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha's free choice of the Aristotelian method is, in my opinion, not an accident or historical happenstance. In other words, there is a reason and purpose for it, so their choice is not simply a detail that we can overlook. For this, there are two reasons. First, for non-Baha'is, these concepts, terms, and arguments are an integral part of the text. They cannot be explained away and consequently must be dealt with. Second, this argument also holds for Baha'is, but with an additional reason, namely, the texts are divinely inspired and therefore must be accepted as they are given. It also follows that since the nature of the world is God-given, Aristotle did not invent the laws of logic or metaphysical concepts by which to analyze and understand reality. Aristotle's contribution was merely to formalize the laws of reasoning and to identify the pre-existing aspects of the world. Indeed, the logical laws he formulates are universal to all human beings, and, consciously or unconsciously, are used by everyone on a daily basis. This universality is precisely what makes it useful for providing a common basis of understanding in the quest for a unified world. A short historical note is also necessary at this point about the presence of Greek philosophy in Persia. In 529 of the Common Era, the Roman Emperor Justinian ordered the closure of the University of Athens, thereby forcing all Platonic, Aristotelian, and Neoplatonic philosophers into exile. These philosophies were, in Justinian's views, anti-Christian and therefore had no place in the officially Christian Roman Empire. Many of these Greek philosophers accepted an invitation from the Persian Emperor Khosrow I and went to Persia, taking their texts with them. The influence of the imported Greek philosophers on Muslim philosophy and culture was enormous. Especially noteworthy are the works of Avicenna, who died in 1037, Common Era, Ibn Rushd, who died in 1198, Suhrawardi, who died in 1191, and Mullah Sadra, who died in 1641. We must, however, remember that the Baha'i writings employ these concepts and terminology in a manner fully consistent with the original Greek authors. Furthermore, as already noted, Baha'u'llah never attended any school, and possessed innate knowledge of whatever he spoke about or wrote about. Therefore, his choice of these specific Greek concepts and their elaboration by Abdu'l-Baha must have been intentional to direct our philosophical thinking in a particular direction. We shall explore this in greater detail in our talks about Baha'i epistemology. For Baha'is, the use of Aristotle, Plato, and Plotinus has at least two consequences. It seems obvious to study the philosophy embedded in the Baha'i writings by using the concepts provided by the Baha'i writings themselves. Why would Baha'u'llah, Abdu'l-Baha, and Shoghi Effendi introduce these concepts and terms into the sacred texts if they did not intend us to use them? Indeed, as we shall see throughout these talks, knowledge of the Greek concepts they employ helps clarify and sharpen our understanding of the texts. The second consequence is that the consistent use of the Greek philosophical tradition confirms the truth of these concepts and terms, used not only in relationship to the Baha'i writings, but also in analyzing and understanding reality. Such analysis includes contemporary socio-political, economic, cultural, and societal developments in general. For non-Baha'is, using the Greek tradition represents a rational and logically coherent alternative to the dominant physicalist, positivist, analytical, postmodern, and neo-Marxist thinking that dominates contemporary philosophical talk. There is a growing disenchantment with the insistence on a strictly materialist metaphysics, often coupled with a narrow emphasis on language, formal logic, and mathematics, as well as a piecemeal approach to understanding reality. The same may be said of both postmodernism, with its absolutist emphasis on subjectivity and skepticism about objective truth, and of neo-Marxism's visions of a relentless class warfare mixed up with a utopian pipe dream about a stateless world in which a man can hunt in the morning, fish in the afternoon, rear cattle in the evening, and criticize after dinner. This is from Marx's The German Ideology, Part 1. One of the signs of this increasing disillusionment is the development, among other trends, a growth of neo-Aristotelianism in a strong revival as a method of understanding in regard to reality and the sciences, ethics, epistemology, and the philosophy of human nature. Here is a list of contemporary philosophers who have had an impact as neo-Aristotelians: Edward Feser, Henry Veitch, Thomas E. Taco, Daniel G. Novotny, G. E. M. Anscombe, Rosalind Hursthouse, Norris Clarke, and Mortimer Adler. We can even add quantum physicist pioneer Werner Heisenberg to the list. He explicitly states that using the Aristotelian concept of potentials and its intrinsic implications are useful in understanding reality at the quantum level. Norris Clarke and Edward Feser have written extensively about how many of Aristotle's concepts have made their way into modern philosophy and science, albeit under different names. See, for example, Feser's Aristotle's Revenge and Clarke's The One and the Many. They show, for example, Aristotle's concept of potentials is now called a disposition for certain results to reappear. In short, the Greek tradition does not block the Baha'i In addition, the Baha'i use of the Baha'i writings using the Greek terminology does not lock the Baha'i writings into an antiquated and irrelevant worldview. Baha'u'llah, Abdu'l-Baha, and Shoghi Effendi employ the Aristotelian, Platonic, and Plotinian foundational terms and concepts to explicate Baha'u'llah's teachings and to apply them to traditional and modern issues. Among these modern issues we find the following. Number 1, a philosophical solution to the mind-body problem. Number 2, mankind's spiritual, social, economic, and political evolution towards a unified federal world commonwealth. A new framework for economics and labor relations. A philosophy of freedom as well as equality and equity. A metaphysically based philosophy of justice, and justice as a metaphysical principle. Number 6, the essential oneness of all religions. Number 7, the ultimate oneness of science and religion. Number 8, a philosophical solution to the conflict between metaphysical materialism and metaphysical idealism in the form of emanationism, which is taught by the writings. Number 9, the concept of qualia as discussed in the neurosciences and neurophilosophy. And number 10, a new psychology of human nature based on our supernatural orientation to existence. The Baha'i writings' philosophical worldview begins with the most philosophically general topics and then becomes more specific in a logically coherent order. In other words, each topic is prepared for by its predecessor and prepares for its successor. They do this by providing the necessary and sufficient principles, information, and arguments to establish a clear line of reasoning. In my understanding, this order is as follows. Number 1, metaphysics, which deals with the origin, nature, and structure of reality as a whole. ontology, which deals with the specific nature of different kinds of things. Number 3, philosophy of human nature, both the essential and universal and the individual. Next, epistemology, what we can know and how we can know it. Then ethics, both personal and societal, at the material and spiritual level. Aesthetics, which is the role of arts and the concepts of beauty and human evolution. Note that Baha'u'llah is often referred to as the Blessed Beauty. Then philosophy of history, what we can see in and learn from the historical process. And human evolution, which deals with the next stage of mankind's material, psychological, societal, and political development. As we shall observe in future talks, the order is inferential, unfolding from certain foundational principles in a step-by-step order. I would like to conclude this first talk by emphasizing that the Baha'i faith is first and foremost, and in essence, a revealed religion, and no mere philosophy, as Shoghi Effendi says in The World Order of Baha'u'llah, page 196. Unlike any man-made philosophy, Baha'u'llah's revelation has imbued mankind with a new spirit of life breathed into the body of the world. That's from Promulgation of Universal Peace, page 95. In order to improve the character of all men. That's from Abdul Baha's Will and Testament. Baha'u'llah has imbued mankind with a new and a regenerating spirit, says Shoghi Effendi in The World Order of Baha'u'llah, page 19. As the global growth of the Baha'i faith demonstrates, this new and regenerating spirit, growing from the bottom up and not imposed by force from the top down, has transformed the character and lives of millions around the world. The teachings and the administration have been successfully field tested in virtually every country and across virtually all cultures. The phrase, a new spirit of life, should not be understood as a pleasant-sounding but vacuous platitude without substantial context. The desperate need for a new regenerating spirit becomes terrifyingly obvious when we examine the history of the 20th century. This history provides several examples of revolutionaries striving to improve the lives of mankind. However, they lacked a truly new and regenerating spirit. That is, they acted in the old spirit of competitive power politics, often fueled by concepts of relentless class warfare, ultranationalism, social Darwinism, intrinsic racial superiority, and/or rigid concepts of elitism. They did so in a coercive top-down manner, which was unable to genuinely transform character and subsequently human action. This is why these regimes were only variations of the very past they were trying to undo. The Russian Revolution is one clear example from which we can all learn. Imbued with a spirit of relentless class warfare and without fundamental character reform, the revolutionaries basically recreated the old socio-political order they sought to abolish. In significant respects, they simply repeated the past. The autocratic Tsar was replaced by autocratic political leaders like Lenin and Stalin. The aristocracy was replaced by the party cadres and functionaries who enjoyed many special privileges. The Okhrana, the Tsarist secret police, was replaced by the Cheka, the NKVD, and the KGB. And just as before under the Tsar, the peasants and ordinary Russians were at least as oppressed as before. Indeed, in some ways, worse in light of the vast gulag forced labor slave camps spread throughout the nation. Social interaction, morals, art, law, education, economic policy, and even medical care were coordinated with this extreme materialist vision of existence. Nazi Germany offers another stark example of the importance of a new and regenerating spirit in attempts to reconstruct the world. The Nazis used the advanced technology and science and harnessed them to a mercilessly racist, tribal, and socially Darwinist agenda for the supposed renewal of the world. Its motivating spirit was a Darwinist survival of the fittest exaltation of mankind's lowest animal behavior as a matter of consciously directed socio-political, cultural, and international policy. In short, science and technology were drafted to serve humanity's oldest, most basic animal tendencies to recreate mankind in a totally racially based and ultra-tribalized future. This contrast between its modern methods and its primitive animalistic vision of life is one of Nazism's distinctive features. Here, too, all aspects of private and public life were reshaped by this narrow vision of human nature. Social interaction, morals, art, law, education, economic policy, and even medical care were controlled by this vision. Both visions, Marxism and Nazism, and their contemporary derivatives, are characterized by extreme othering, that is, the relentless rejection and vicious persecution of those who disagree with their views and or do not fit into their understanding of human nature. Both are eliminationist, that is, they seek the complete annihilation of dissidents by whatever means necessary and guide their morality by this goal. Demonizing is intrinsic to their nature and in a way of operating. This tragic pattern, repeated in all kinds of variations elsewhere, shows that a genuinely new and regenerative spirit is necessary to make the deep, far-reaching changes to improve and advance mankind. This observation was one of the deciding factors why I became convinced that Baha'u'llah's revelation offered a realistic hope for change by a constant re-emphasis on the essential oneness of human nature and its strategy of building from the bottom up. This ends my first talk. Thank you for your attention. The next talk will dive more deeply into the role of reason in the Baha'i writings and the conclusions that follow.